In the electric line school, I introduced myself to the head of the echelon, Nikolai Efremovich Basistom. It turned out that he was the chief of staff of the 1st Naval Brigade of the Far East Naval Forces, and I was appointed flag navigator of the same brigade. In the echelon, I was in charge of housekeeping. This last message made my navigator's soul boil. I immediately expressed my dissatisfaction to Basistom and received a calm reply. The order is signed. On the way you are assigned duties about which you have already been told. In 3 days, given for the arrangement of personal affairs, you and your belongings must be in the electromine school. Families are not allowed. Familiarize yourself with the household crew, and you are free to go. The journey began with bad weather. Into the day of shipment, the personnel left Kronstadt for Oranienbaum on foot, on ice. It was a frosty March morning. They walked cheerfully, with songs, but apparently slowly. They came to the railroad train standing on the tracks of Oranienbaum Harbour. Some people jumped into the Teplishi on the way. At the marshalling station in Leningrad, where we arrived in the evening, the navigator head shopkeeper had a new attack. It turned out that there were 2 wagons with camp kitchens. There were foodstuffs. There were meat carcasses, but there was nothing to cut meat with. There is no axe or carving knife. The Red Fleet men were jokingly humming. It's time, they said, to eat pasta and meat. The Bassi one demanded that the navigator chief should turn quickly. It was supper time. And how will you turn around? And suddenly, during the brightest heat of emotions, a bass voice sounded from the darkness. What's all the fuss? What's wrong? Can't cut the meat. Clearly it's a problem. You can't cut it with a stick. Don't worry, by dawn we'll arrive at the station. They'll give you axes. The speaker raised a lantern, lit a cigarette, and we learned from him that it was an employee of the Transportation Department of the State Political Department who spoke to us. He did not give his last name. And at dawn at the station I was met by a man. Are you Andreev? He asked. Let's go. We came to the station gatehouse, opened the door and saw an old carpenter in a leather apron, with his hair tucked under a leather strap, working on an axe. I looked around the gatehouse with my eyes looking for another axe, but found none. Bad again. We have 2 kitchens at different ends of the echelon, but only 1 axe. What should I do? Run on the roofs of the cars with an axe? Having finished fiddling with the axe head, grandfather put the axe on. Then he wiped it with his apron, took it in both hands as one takes bread and salt, and handed it to me. Here, son, I guess you are going to war. From this father's gift, my heart thumped. Interesting people gathered in our tren. The chief of staff, Basisty, commander of the minesweeper Novikov, flag mechanic of the brigade machine god, Sokolov, commander of the minesweeper division Krustin, commanders of minesweepers Mikhailov, Krinovi, political officer Bystrikov, instructor of the political department of our brigade Balyaski, who as a boy accompanied the writer Mikhail Mikhailovich Prishvin in his wanderings through the forests and fields of the Russian land. Nikolai Efremovich Basisty took with him maps and logs of the Sea of Japan, and we were able to familiarize ourselves with the Sea of Japan, mysterious for most of us, with bays, harbors, and few ports of our coast. So far we have learned about Vladivostok only what was described in Makarov's works and Davidov's Lotier. The city, its way of life, traditions, and customs turned out to be much more interesting. Our echelon was moving with delays. Then the bearings on the locomotive failed. Someone's evil hand covered them with sand. Then the echelon with coal that was ahead of us as a cover went off the rails. The situation made us look out, and our men somehow immediately became gloomy. At the beginning of the 2nd decade of April, 1932, we arrived to Vladivostok. We were accommodated there in barracks behind Meltsevsky Bazaar. In the beautiful Zolotoy Rog Bay, there is rare floating ice. At the berths of the trading port, there are several transports. There are also in the area of Cape Churkin, but nowhere can one see the usual silhouette of a warship. Where are these minesweepers and minesweepers on which we are to serve? There were not them, just as there were not in the barracks the necessary number of beds and steam heating. A few days later, with the Black Sea echelon, arrived Brigade Commander Avvazaliv, the most experienced miner and expert in trawling mines. Soon the situation with the ships began to become clearer. The Soviet merchant fleet gave us the transports Tomsk, Erivan, Stavropol to convert them into minesweepers, fishermen, trawlers Aire, Gagara, Plastu, and Baiklan, and commercial port. Tugs Hercules, Patrokol, Diomid, Slavianka, and Bosporus, which were to become minesweepers. For all the ships, 2 months were allotted for all the work. The most difficult thing was to convert the holds of the transports, future minesweepers, into mine cellars, to place mines in them in several tiers, to lay mine tracks on the upper and twin deck decks, to make latsports for dropping mine, to install mine slopes and additional mountings for artillery guns. On trawlers it was necessary to remove all devices for fish extraction and processing, to lay mine tracks on the upper deck, and in the aft superstructure to equip latsports and install artillery armament. On all ships it was necessary to equip additional cabins, to make cabins for the command staff. It was necessary to provide the ships with navigational instruments of domestic production, radios and communication means accepted in the Navy. The scope of work was colossal. Their fulfillment was entrusted to the plant and to the ship's crews. We worked day and night in several shifts. The attention and assistance of the party organizations of the region and the city were exceptional. The enthusiasm of all workers of the plant, designers, employees of the main military port, all the personnel of the brigade was enormous. As a result, in 2 months, just 2 months, the minesweepers went into service. The minesweepers started their service even earlier. They transferred cargoes, towed barges with materials necessary for the defense construction, which was deployed on a wide front. All of us understood how we had to hurry to create a reliable defense of our shores in the Pacific Ocean. Difficulties were encountered at every step. There was a shortage of labourers, and the commodores, under the direction of Brig Brzezinski, the brig's flagship artilleryman, were manually drilling holes in the deck to install drums for the base of the artillery guns. All miners participated in the construction of racks in the cargo holds, which had to be made of wood due to the lack of metal. On multi-story racks of each ship it was necessary to catch about 500 mines, each of which weighed several hundred kilograms. It was necessary to fix this cargo so that at sea it could withstand any rock. The machinery team had to rebuild and repair all mechanisms, cargo winches on the upper deck, anchor and steering devices, and many other things. The soul of all these affairs was the flagship mechanic Sokolov, our Marconi, the brig's flagship signalman Parishkai. A man of few words, even gloomy in appearance, conjured together with his radio operators over the means of communication in order to be able to replace them in time with new ones. I, as the brig's flag navigator, had to meet with the most diverse, almost museum-like, navigational equipment. For example, with compasses of the oldest samples, which we had never heard of neither in the school nor in the navigator's class, with rope lags of cherub type, to count the distance travelled with the help of such a lag, we had to run from the commander's bridge to the stern, at night, with a flashlight, and what to do when during mine-laying the whole upper deck would be full of mines. There was a small hydrographic service unit in the fleet, which was charged with the duty of installing compasses, because of the small number of specialists could not help us, and so flagship navigator as you wish, so do it. If for ordinary warships there were documents on combat training, its methodology, list of exercises, then for our unique, or as naval witters said, abnormal connection, of course, there were no guiding documents. It so happened that the ancestors of the now mighty surface ships of the Pacific Fleet were civilian vessels, which were unsightly in appearance. They were re-equipped by workers of the shipyard under the guidance of engineer-builder Tulubiatnikov. While all necessary works were being carried out, we had an opportunity to get acquainted with one local attraction, a fog so thick that you can't see anything for several tens of meters. This week-long fog was really formidable for us. And then there were winds, currents, oncoming ships. Remembering all these difficulties, I would like to say a huge thank you to the captains of those civilian ships that were transferred to the military fleet, their navigators. According to the law of true maritime brotherhood, they helped us a lot. They told us about the peculiarities of navigation in far eastern waters, about local signs of weather changes, about the methods allowing to determine how close the ship was to the shore when sailing in low visibility. Their experience was very useful for all of us. Thus, from the very beginning of our stay here, a strong friendship between military and civilian sailors was established. It was especially bright during the years of the Great Patriotic War, in particular during landing operations during the liberation of the southern part of Sakhalin, the Kuril Islands, in all the landings in Korean. But it was already later, and in 1932 we had to study as soon as possible the area of Peter the Great Bay, where it was necessary to create a system of powerful batteries of coastal defense. capable together with our brigade to protect the sea approaches to the border. To select the location of mine artillery positions, in the sea went out on the patrol ship Red Vimpel Reconnaissance Group, headed by the Commandant of Coastal Defense Abelisiv. The group included navigators of our brigade Gorshkov, Melnikov, Potapenko, and me. I had to lead the navigators as senior. From this first navigational trip, the study of Peter the Great Bay began. Usually, having come to any bay, we rowed in a dinghy, went to the shore and made sketches, took measurements at all piers and wharves. We entered literally all bays, sketched and described notable places, measured sea depths, helped, as we could, artillery reconnaissance. During such trips, many places amazed us with their beauty. The bay on Oskold Island, America Bay, Strelok Bay, Slaviansky Bay, and the archipelago of Rimsky-Korsakov Islands were especially enchanting. Our first cruise along Peter the Great Bay turned out to be very useful and gave a lot to its participants. Navigators. K. Melnikov, navigator of the minesweeper Stavropol and S. Gorshkov, navigator of the flagship Tomsk, showed their outstanding navigational abilities and keen observation. The navigators held regular classes with the command staff of the ships, and i.e. with the flagship specialists. We studied the theatre first by navigational charts and then by dumb ones. In each wardroom hung a large enough size drawn with oil paints on linoleum silent map of Peter the Great Bay. That the momentous day came, the re-equipment and repair of the flagship Tomsk were finished, coal and food were accepted. The first departure for sea trials and deviation determination took. We departed from the pier. We are not in a hurry. All brigade commanders are on the upper bridge. I'm assisted in my work flagship communications officer and navigator of the ship. Flagship gunner Brzezinski with the ship's gunners are preparing to test the artillery armor. Flagship minesweeper Golovko with miners busy mine cellars, all in high spirits. You bet, a first exit of the first ship of the 1st Brigade of surface ships of the Maritime Forces of the Far East. The weather is as ordered. The navigators started deviation work and are spinning between 4 compasses like squirrels in a wheel. On the next tack I notice, one cargo boom of the second hold is raised and the other is lowered. Bosuns are fiddling with block. I demand from the commander of the ship that the booms were fixed strictly in the working position, which will be lifted mines from the hold. Otherwise we will not bring in order magnetic compasses. In the end, the cargo booms were set properly. The navigators finished their work, determined the deviation, calculated corrections. The ship entered the Ushuriyski Bay. The bay is wide and beautiful. In the southeast, the top of Mount Joseph is visible. Even further south, the island of Askold is looming. In the southwest, numerous islands of the Rimsky-Korsakov archipelago go into the distance. We navigators have done our job. We are calm at heart. We can smoke a pipe. Now it's up to the gunners, miners and mechanics. The day went exceptionally well. Everything we had planned, we've accomplished. Well, that's the beginning of the Navy life of our unit. It was already obvious. In the Sea of Japan, with its months-long fogs, we'll have to mainly by calculation, the accuracy of which largely depends on the knowledge of maneuvering elements of ships, the definition of lag corrections, and the influence of drift. Therefore, these questions were practiced in the brigade in the most thorough manner. We realized how important it would be during joint mine laying in poor visibility or at night. Of course, it was not an easy job, but everyone was rewarded by the beauty. I can't say otherwise, just beauty. And clarity of joint evolution of all the barriers. One looks and admires it and one's heart rejoices, observing how the barriers performed their evolutions, the chief of the Far East Naval Forces M.V. Viktorov once said. They maneuver clearly, beautifully like battleships. It is hard to deserve a higher praise. Succinctly, one after another new ships came into service. Gradually our life was getting better. Through the care of the brigade command, almost all the command staff received orders for housing, and we began to make grandiose, daring in its design plans for the organization of personal life. The atmosphere was saturated with dreams about the arrival of wives, children, about home comfort, about everything that is called family happiness and is so dear to everyone. We thought and guessed where and how to buy the most necessary things. Gradually everything settled down. Families could be summoned. Having received the call and having collected their luggage, Golovko's, Mikhailova's and my wives left for Vladivostok. They informed us about it by telegram. Trains were usually late for several days. Therefore our trio Golovko, Mikhailov and I decided to take turns on duty at Mikhailov's apartment on Pozietskaya, not far from the railroad station, and on the eve of arrival, all of us to spend the night there. All night we did not sleep. We could not find a place. We were worried like young boys. We waited for 3 hours on the platform of the station. At last the train appeared, and here was the fifth carriage. In the window we see dear, excited faces. Our joy and happiness had no limits. We were given 3 days of vacation to arrange household affairs. They flew by lightning. We had to return to the ship. When I returned from the sea a few days later, I found a note in the doorway of my room. The key is where we agreed. Started working in the political department. Don't worry, everything is fine. That's what the wives of many of my comrades did. None of the women wanted to stay at home. The personnel of the brigade built a summer cottage for a kindergarten on Russky Island. This garden was headed for many years by the wife of Pyotr Pavlovich Mikhailova. In 1937, a patriotic movement of women enthusiasts widely unfolded in our country, who at the call of Valentina Ketagulva, not afraid of difficulties, went to the Far East to help settle and rebuild this rich region, but that was a little later. The wives who came to us also strived to make their contribution to the common cause. Although it was not easy for the women in the new place, they bore all the hardships stoically. In the struggle against difficulties, in joint hard work, a real friendship grew and strengthened. Such friendship is true and priceless. As soon as the last minesweeper came into service, the brigade left for combat training in Sukhodol Bay. We mastered Strelok Bay, all bays, including America Bay, then Slaviansky Bay, visited all corners of the Amur Bay up to Poziet. We often sailed in fog without any electric navigation devices. The lag readings could not be fully trusted. Seagrass, abundantly floating in the sea, was winding up on the chopper. Therefore, the most reliable indicator of speed was the revolutions of the machine. The accuracy of the calculation depended on how accurately the machinists kept the set revolutions. To the credit of the machinists, they were at their best. They left for long periods of time for combat training and returned to the base only to replenish coal and food supplies. Often they did not even go ashore, had no opportunity to visit home. Sometimes you were moored to the wall, and you could only look at your home. Ship navigators came to me with their report cards after each cruise. We analyzed them together, looking for the reasons that affected the accuracy of calculation. Gradually experience was accumulated, navigational skill grew. Already during the period of ship's re-equipment, high commanding qualities of many of their commanders were revealed. I would especially like to say about the commander of Stavropol Marina. This person had a rich and versatile maritime experience, which affected them. Somehow it so happened that the factory work, carried out by the personnel, on his ship went most quickly. The crew placement in the cabins, equipment of the bridge, and much more was more rational. After the completion of repairs, the ships often had to approach the berths, mooring. And here everyone saw that Marin did it better than anyone else. Mooring was the fastest, with minimal reverse. The commissars Alexander Goldstein, the same Sasha with whom we were sent to the Baltic Fleet in December 1922, as part of the Komsomol mobilization among 500 Komsomol members of Moscow, was also good on this ship. Perhaps it was this successful combination of a fine ship commander and an experienced commissar that allowed the Stavropol to get ahead in maritime culture, service organization, and combat training. Having entered into service, the minesweepers at a rapid pace began to work out the organization of service, which, as well as courses and lists of exercises for combat training for each specialty, the brigade staff and flagship specialists, Andriy, Brzezinski, Golovko, Parisky, Sokolov had to develop independently. In this area, a lot of work was done by the exos of minesweepers Karatayev, Kremov, and ship commanders Novikov, Marin. All worked with fire, as if obsessed, for months without going ashore. The ships often went to sea, practiced joint navigation, organization of mine laying in day and then in night conditions in difficult weather conditions. Usually, having made a joint long voyage in Peter the Great Bay and maneuvers in setting conditional lines of mines, we went to Sukhodol Bay, Slaviansky Bay, America, where we made the actual setting of training mines, the quality of which was determined primarily by the accuracy of the calculation, controlled by observing the locations of mines placed at the beginning and end of each line of mines. All the collected data were superimposed on a common map, with navigators made a thorough analysis, identified the errors of each. Each was given an assessment, which was reported to the brigade command. Such methodology was applied to any joint sailing. The navigator's culture began to increase noticeably, but we were very much hampered by the lack of electromechanical lags. We puzzled how to get out of the situation. Finally, having gathered courage, I went to the Chief of Staff of the brigade and suggested him to send me on a business trip to Leningrad, where, as I knew, in the laboratory of Kudrevich tested several Soviet electromechanical lags. If you send me on a business trip, Kudrevich, with whom I had to meet more than once, having delved into our situation, will definitely give us 3 lags for 3 minesweepers. I'm sure he will. I fervently proved to Basistimu the necessity of such a step. And what else are you sure of? Nikolai Efremovich asked not without irony. That the Chief of Hydrography will give us chronometers, the right number of domestic magnetic compasses, and we will finally be able to throw out all the foreign museum junk. I'm sure of your support, as there's no other way out. Navigator, you're an incorrigible fantasist, and you're hovering somewhere in the clouds. All business trips to the west are forbidden and are regarded as suitcase moves. Comrade Chief of Staff, may I report? If you can't go on a business trip, then let me go on vacation. What kind of vacation? It hasn't been a year. I'm entitled to a vacation for 1931. I didn't use it, though I was given vouchers to the sanatorium. The Chief of Staff is thinking. He's silent. I left the cabin discouraged. My last hope of getting Largian compasses was gone, and without them there's no question of improving the accuracy of the track calculation. 2 days later, Vasiliev called me in. I went into the cabin. Basisty and the military commander of the brigade, Grigoriev, already there. Now, Comrade Andreev, says the brigade commander, tell us about your proposals for a trip to Leningrad. What is the basis of your confidence in success? I reported everything in detail again. Perhaps it's a worthwhile endeavour. The military commander supported me. It is necessary to report to the head of the naval forces and to get permission to give Andreev a formal leave. Well, and if in Leningrad he will not be able to do anything, then strictly ask him. Tudrevich and the chief of the hydrographic department were more than attentive to our requests. They gave us 3 lags, 4 watches, half chronometers, several compasses, and a lot of navigational equipment. The total cargo was about 1.5 tons. Such luggage was not accepted by passenger train, and it was possible to send it only with the help of workers of the transport department of the GPU. I went by courier train in Joy. I took half chronometers and navigational instruments with me. The courier train to Vladivostok travelled for almost 2 weeks. When I arrived at the place, the sent navigational equipment had not arrived yet. 3 months later, having returned from the sea, I received a notice from the railroad workers. In it, they warned me that if the luggage I had sent from Leningrad was not received soon, it would be sold at auction. I ended up having to shell out for the long storage of the cargo on the railroad, to pay an amount greater than my monthly salary. The plant was about to launch the first submarine-type Shie, but it didn't have a lag. We had to share to give 1 lag, and Stavropol still remained with a rope lag. 3 minesweepers under the flag of the commander went on a navigational trip to Cape Igorov. During this campaign, we entered all previously unknown to us bays in areas of fish factories. When the detachment became on the roadstead of Tetuke, where there were mines in the depth of the mainland, the navigators came on a dinghy to the pier. We went out to the wharf. We were met by a watchman, an ancient grandfather armed with a berdanka. As usual, they smoked. We inquired why the wagons with rock were not being delivered from the mine. We have been standing for many days. There is no coal, explained the watchman. Having finished our business, we left some Makhorka for the handsome grandfather and went to Tomsk. There I reported to the brig that the mine was not working. There was no coal. And then Vasiliev ordered all the ships to unload the saved coal on the wharf. Only after the order was executed, the detachment took off the anchor and went to Vladivostok. In conditions when everything has to be started on bare ground, mutual help is especially necessary. Once, when I was already the commander of the barrier ship Theodore Net, in the fall at the pier on the Maley Ulysses, I received an order to deliver pilots to Rangel Bay. We are preparing for the trip, warming up the car. The pilots appear, and among them my classmate at the Naval Preparatory School, Sergei Tikhonov. Strong hug. It turned out that he is the squadron commander We placed our dear guests in the quarters of the staff. We had a heart-to-heart talk over cabin tea. By morning we arrived at our destination. Sergei and I were the first to disembark, and before our eyes opened a harsh picture. The best dwelling was a half-house made of crates. There was no coal, and the nearest shrubbery had been cut down. Sergei's family, his wife and 2 children, were accommodated in the half-dwelling. It's cold. The sun got into his father's huge ounce, but no complaints. The pilots thanked us for our hospitality. We said goodbye, and me and the foreman of the boat, the commander of the stokers department, went to the shore. Comrade Commander, let's give the pilots coal. What coal? I am perplexed. Well, the one we saved. This is a comrade's revenue. The foreman of the stokers' shift offers to give the pilots the coal saved in the sweat of the stokers' labour, to give the legitimate bonus, which was used to buy additional products for the crew of Theodore Net. We reached the ship and together, with the petty officer, went down to the stoker's cabin. Report the proposal. Having listened attentively to the foreman, everyone agreed with him. They decided to pour the coal into the sacks, through the coal mines to lift them to the upper deck, to load them into a dinghy, to bring them to the shore, and there to carry them on their shoulders for 200 meters. The stokers were ready to do it not by order, but by the dictates of their souls, by the dictates of the law of comradeship. This is an example from the life of one ship, but it was so in the whole fleet. There are thousands of such examples. December 1932 was severe. Strong north winds were blowing. At the approach to Vladivostok, merchant ships were freezing, turning into icebergs. Smaller ships had it even worse. We also had a lot of hardship returning in the last 5 days of December from another trip to Malé Ulysses. We barely cleared the Tomsk from ice and began to prepare for the new year. On the eve of the holiday in the evening, the nor'easter howled with special zeal. Additional moorings were put on the Tomsk. My superiors let me go ashore only after dinner, and at 2 o'clock in the morning there was a persistent knock on the door and a demanding voice. Sings Comrade Flagstaff. The commander urgently summons you to the ship. We went out with the messenger. The night is dark. In the city it was still bearable to go. Light was falling from the windows, but as soon as we went through the rotten corner, we plunged into total darkness. Here was the wharf. The Tomsk is smoking, and smoke is pouring from the pipe of the minesweeper standing at the side. We ran down the gangway. Grigorev and Basisty are in the brig's cabin besides himself. It turns out that in the sea missing patrol ship Red Pennant, and we have to go out to search together with the minesweeper Hercules. We'll go to sea as soon as the Chief of Naval Forces arrives on board Tomsk. Much Comrade Andreev, I ask you to define the search area and lay the courses. Vasiliev addressed me. In the navigator's cabin, I read the last report received from the Red Pennants. It is iced over. The crew is seasick. I can't move forward. It is carried away into the sea. Then latitude and time, 22 hours and 30 minutes, were indicated. The place was 27 miles to the southwest from Askold Island. It was already 3:30. In 5 hours, the ship had gone far away, and by the time we reach it, it will be carried farther away. Calculated the area and search courses. 2 ships of the front line. Just put everything on the map. As the emergency calls were heard and Mikhail Vladimirovich Viktorov, dressed in a leather reglai, entered the deckhouse. He immediately came to the map and approved our search calculations. The wind is blowing northwest. 8 points. The farther we go to the south, the wind becomes stronger, the wave is higher, and to the south of Askold's parallel, it started to be difficult to describe. Jules then rises on the crest of the wave, then falls down so that only masts are visible. The frost is strong, the water spray is frozen at once. Gradually the boards of Tomsk become glazed, and winches, holds, decks are dressed in an icy ship. This is on our ship with a high board, but what is it like on the little Hercules? The whole crew has been working with crowbars to free the minesweeper from ice for a long time. We are approaching the search area. The ship has 2 additional observers on each side, but no Red Pennant. The sea is deserted, no one but us. So we walk around for hours looking for... Where did he go? It's gone into the water. The commander of the ship, Renthal, wonders aloud. Blasphemy on your tongue. Angrily throws Viktorov. Nachevznata, Comrade Chief of Naval Forces, reached the southern border of the search area, we are report. After some deliberation, Viktorov orders to follow the same course for another hour. We have passed. Nothing was found except an empty herring barrel. Navigator, let's go to the chart. We went down to the deckhouse. We're standing at the navigator's desk. Viktorov is looking at the map carefully, thinking. He frowned. I can feel that he's worried. A strong-willed, dedicated, intelligent and versatile educated sailor, he was often harsh, but he could show amazing care for people. I knew that from myself. I wanted to say something comforting to him now. Earlier, when I was under his direct command, perhaps I could, but now I can't say it. The distance has increased, and with it the subordination. What are we going to do, Navigator? Our Vimpel is gone. Where to go now? It remains to get closer to Askold and request the observation post. Maybe he saw in what direction the Vimpel disappeared. We turned around. That's when we felt what a northwest is when you go towards the wind, into the muzzle. Tomsk stands on the pips, and it is terrible to look at Hercules. The pace has slowed down, and the trawler began to lag behind. Wind and splashes hit the face with such force that it's impossible to look. Change the search course 45 degrees to the right, Viktorov ordered. The course was changed. Ships are no longer whipping, but increased on-board rocking. Now the waves crashing against the board, flooding the deck. The ice is freezing even more. The shore-in is getting closer. The lighthouse of Askold Island appeared. 20 minutes later, Viktorov read a report from the island's observation post. During the night, I observed one ship slowly heading north. Perhaps it was the Vimpel. What do you think? In what bay could he be hiding? Viktorov addressed to all those in the navigator's cabin. Having consulted, we decided to go to Strelok Bay. Hercules followed in the keel. The wind had died down a little. The wave has slightly decreased. When we entered Strelok Bay, it was completely calm. But there was no one in the bays. We turned to the right to examine Abrek Bay, and several observers reported at once. Red Pennant is in the bay. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. As they approached, they saw that there was not a soul on the deck of the ship. We came even closer. Viktorov takes a megaphone. On the Red Pennant. Commander upstairs. Barbarin jumped out on deck. Is the ship all right? Yes, a term to Sharks. Leave anchor now and proceed to base. As Barbarin was an anarchist, so he still is, Mikhail Vladimirovich said in his heart. We arrived at the base an hour later than the Red Vimpel. The watch commander reported that in 5 minutes the flag would be lowered. The horn player played Zoria. On the deck and on the bridge, everyone stood to the side, frozen in a standstill position and watching the slowly descending flag with their eyes. The ritual of raising and lowering the flag is majestic and severe. It is beautiful in its content, the meeting with the naval flag of the ship and farewell to him. Leaving the ship, the chief of the naval forces ordered to announce to the crews of Tomsk and Hercules the gratitude for excellent actions and to give 2 days of rest. Such was the New Year's Eve and the first day of the new year 1933. Fortunately, everything turned out safely, and this, if you believe the folk omen, was a guarantee that the coming year would be difficult but favourable. On one of the September days of 1933, together with flagship liaison officer Parisky and flagship mechanic Sokolov, I was summoned to Basiston's office. Report in what condition are the combat units of the barrier Erivan, subordinated to U.S. specialists. Is it possible to send Erivan on a campaign to Kastrai with a member of the Military Council of the Naval Forces of the Far East, Bulishkin, although it is autumn, a pleasant season on the Sea of Japan, but there are no guarantees against fogs and storms. We reported everything in detail to Basistom. Having listened to us, Nikolai Euphemovich asked one last question. So much time will it take to prepare Erivan for the campaign? 3 days. Sokolov answered for all of us. Basisti took the telephone receiver and called the command. Reports Chief of Staff. On all combat units Erivan in order. It takes 3 days to receive coal, cargo and instrumentation. I ask permission to send the flag navigator and the communications officer. He immediately turned to us. Did you hear the conversation? Proceed. Report the progress of preparations together with the morning report, all urgent matters, at any time of the day. Parisky and I almost choked with joy. Our dream would come true. We would visit the farthest northern area of the Sea of Japan, the Tata Strait. We prepared for the trip as for a big holiday. Everyone wanted to finally see the whole Sea of Japan, not only Peter the Great Bay. Together with the navigator of the Erevan Potapenka, we worked out the route, laying it so that it was possible to study the shores of Prime. The day of departure came. A. Bailishkin and his companions, up to the prosecutor of the fleet, arrived on the ship. Bailishkin, going around the formation, said hello to the crew. The signal requesting permission to leave was raised on the rails. The call signs Erivani and Dobro soon appeared at the main signal post. The moorings were given. Braspiel selected the anchor, and we went out to sea. The weather favoured us. Visibility was excellent. Bailishkin went up to the upper bridge. The commander of the ship, Tikhon Andreyevich Novikov, told him about everything he had seen at sea, about Peter the Great Bay. Bailishkin is an old Bolshevik, formerly a St. Petersburg worker. Not tall, trim, with a friendly, open Russian face, slightly touched by smallpox. With an attentive look, he somehow immediately disposed of himself. Bailishkin kept himself simple, willingly listened to the interlocutor, did not hesitate to ask questions. You tell fascinating stories. Do you miss the Baltic, the destroyer you commanded there? Bailishkin turned to Novikov. It's true, I miss the destroyer. But I think the time is not far off when there will be not only destroyers on the Pacific Ocean. I dream of commanding more modern ships here. I like your frankness and thoughts about the Navy. Good talk. One thing I don't understand. Why are you still living like a bum? Many commanders have families already arrived, but your family won't go, or they don't want to part with Leningrad. Tikhon Andreyevich's face turned sour. It's easy for them. They have no children, and I have 2 girls. Give them schools of music and dancing. Both interlocutors were comfortably seated on the main compass pedestal, and I became an involuntary witness of their conversation. What does Navigator Andreev think? What does he dream about? Bailishkin turned to me. What do I think about? With rope lags, you can't achieve accuracy of navigation in the Sea of Japan, which is full of algae. It is necessary to have electric lags and gyro compasses on barriers. Well, that's the pros, so to speak. Don't you have a cherished dream? Yes, and what a dream. To sail around the entire Soviet Far East coast. You can't become a real Pacific Islander without it. Is that all? Why only? My deepest dream, born in the Baltic, is to become a destroyer commander in our fleet. I don't need anything else in my life at sea. No, don't you dream of returning to the battleship? Don't you regret your transfer from the Marat? Marat was a good school for me. It and comrades, of course. You cannot forget. But here my comrades are excellent. The sea is interesting. I work with pleasure. You can't think of better conditions to become a real sailor. But only sailing in the fog is not easy and exhausting. But as they say, he who finds his way at night will not get lost in the daytime. The sun disappeared behind the horizon. The ship was running, splitting the breathing sea, whipping white curly hissing foam. Night was coming. At night we practiced astronomy with the ship's cadets, among whom was the younger brother of the remarkable commissar of the Naval Preparatory School of Kovel. The younger brother followed in the footsteps of the elder. He visibly excelled in navigational matters, perfectly oriented in the starry sky, confidently possessed a sextant, faster and better than others, solved astronomical problems. By midnight, the astronomical observations were over. It was the time of dog, watch from 0 to 4 hours. On the ship, almost all quieted down. The sea was smooth. The moon barely highlights the peaks and deep rocky wrinkles of Sait-Hodalin. The moon track, like a searchlight, slowly, as if afraid to miss something floating unnoticed, slides along the sea surface. I love such nights at sea. They give me rest and inspiration. They give birth to some kind of mental elevation. In addition to the watchman on the bridge, we are with XO Boris Karatayev. Having gone through school on destroyers, he was as good as his commander. That's why Erevan was famous for good organization of service. I am comfortably seated near the main compass, smoking a pipe. I admire the nature and relax. Boris sat down next to me. No, how is it, Boris? The bosses are not bothering you. I jokingly ask him. No way. Tikhon Andreevich is a pleasure to serve with. He's an excellent man, a commander too. There is something to learn from him. The night was beautiful, favoring good thoughts. Not a cloud, not a breeze. The shore was silent. The ship and the stars. The night, rare in its beauty, as well as the barograph, did not portend any storms. Dawn was busy in its colourful multicolour. The sky first slightly pinked, then blazed and finally shone with golden rays. So where is the indescribable beauty of Cape Marble? Suddenly came Baleshkin's voice. Andreev said that it would be there by morning. The morning came and there was no cape. Comrade member of the military council, the dawn has just gone. It's not morning yet, and Cape Marble is on the left, much to the left of the lighthouse. Do you see how it shines in the sunlight, standing out against the dark wooded background of the coast with its marble white? Novikov explains. Olga Bay is small. Its shores are steep, precipitous and high. There is a lot of greenery on them. In the depth of the bay is the mountain peak Avakuma, the river of Akumovka. Moving along its bank, after a few tens of kilometers you can get to the Narzanik spring opened by tiger hunters. The entrance to the bay is guarded by a small fortress like island Tikashev with high rock walls. There is a lighthouse on it. We go straight to the Marble Cape, and it increases in front of our eyes. The cape is already 10 cable meters away. Novikov looks at me. Isn't it time to turn away? Distance of 7 cable meters, reports the rangefinder. Now we can look at the cape only with our heads up. The water near this shore is especially clear, azure almost like in the Mediterranean Sea. Range of 6 cable meters. Starboard, Novikov commands. Navigator course? 70 degrees. Indeed, the panorama is worthy of attention, notes Bolishkin. If this panorama is decorated with good batteries of coastal defense and supplemented with at least a connection of torpedo boats, it will turn out to be a decent place for basing the fleet forces, adds Tikhon Andreyevich. Novikov and Bulishkin went down to the salon. The ship's course is laid out so that the details of the coastline and notable places were visible. The ship's cadets and commanders free from watch, summoned by the XO, began to sketch and describe. With the consent of the ship's senior officer, exercises, classes and work went on as usual, but on one condition: not to interfere with anyone's work in the allotted cabins, wardroom and saloon. In the afternoon the clouds appeared. What does the navigator think about the weather? Asks Novikov. I think, goodbye visibility. The sky will be covered with clouds. There is the barograph rolled under the mountain. The breeze will freshen up and the rain, judging by the bulletin, will not. Indeed, by evening the clouds, caught on the mountain ridges, overcame them and rushed to the sea. There were lambs on the water. The wave overboard no longer rang with bells, but hissed like a 1,000-headed snake. It got colder in the fall. It began to rain, a little rain at first, and then it poured down like fire hoses. It poured for an hour, poured for another. It did not subside. By morning the visibility did not reach 10 cable meters. The weather was bad, but I decided to go into the bathroom to shave. I opened the door and lo and behold, in the bathtub on his back lies a happy-faced bear cub a little shorter than my shoulder. The faucet with a wooden handle is half open. Warm water is flowing with a rather strong jet. The bear rubs his belly and chest with a clawed paw with visible pleasure, splashing dirty brown water in all directions. I try to pick him up by his front paw and drive him out. No way. He's stubborn, growling, though we were always on friendly terms with him, and he usually lured away from me all the sugar hidden for his treats. Now the bear is angry. No friendship does not recognize and yells at the whole ship. I had to get out of the bathtub. I went to the engine room. Why did you, Comrade Flag Navigator, come to see us? I need a shave, but the bear won't let me in the bath. He's splashing in the water himself. What a bloody nuisance. We barely got him out of the car. One day someone guessed to open a test tap of the freshwater main to give the bear a drink. Since then, when he's thirsty, he goes down the ramp to the car with his arse. I wash my face, shave, and walk past the bathroom. Bear's not there anymore. The bathroom and the corridor, where the Toptigian had gotten into trouble, the Red Fleet men cleaned up thoroughly. Everybody loved Mishka very much and forgave him his mischief. I did not see anyone ever hit the bear cub or treated him rudely in any way. I had a class with the ship's cadets on exploring the area. The class was interesting, and the time passed unnoticed. Only the commander's voice in the intercom interrupted. On the bottom running, comrades academicians, it's time to disperse. In 10 minutes lunch? We're sailing according to the calculation. Low cloud cover, visibility is limited. From the quicksand the ship begins to rock. The roll reaches 7 degrees. After lunch the wind is fresher. All but the top watch took shelter from the weather below. Suddenly the bells of the loud battle rang. The bugler played the signal battle drill. From all the vestibules and exits to the upper deck, the Red Fleet men jumped out and scattered to their battle stations. From the hatches of cargo holds turned into mine cellars, tarpaulin covers, latrines and bims are removed. Engineers urgently warm up steam winches of cargo booms to lift mines from the cellars. The onboard rocking is small, but it is not easy to stand and work on wet platforms for rolling mines. Bulishkin went to the upper bridge. In about 3 minutes began to receive reports on the readiness of combat units. A comrade member of the military council, the ship is ready for battle, Novikov reports. A tense silence settled on the ship. Everyone was waiting for the command. Sacked commander according to the plan, orders Bulishkin. Shiatatev gives the command. Shedro from the cellars of 20 mines to serve, on the upper deck to roll out. Steam winches started working at the holds. A barely noticeable gesture of the chief petty officer of miners Kovalenko and Bashkirtsev, the machinist of the right winch of the second hold, at full speed deftly and accurately raises a mine from the cell. Excellent machinist. Golden hands. On the launching pad, the mine tries to roll on its own on a slippery iron sheet overboard. The hands of miners hold it and direct it to the rails of mine tracks. You can see with what physical tension people work. Every 20 seconds, the mine that appeared from the hatch is sent to the mine tracks, where the combat crew fixes it to the peaceful rails. Very hard work, looked beautiful. All actions were coordinated and fast. It seemed that with a mine weighing several hundred kilograms, the combat crews coped easily. It was especially difficult to work with mines in night conditions. There were no lights on. To somehow navigate in the cellars, around the hatch lit 4 lamps of night lighting blue color. The winch workers had the hardest time. They could not see where the mine was at all. Bashkirtsev was not confused even here. Put on the rope hemp stamps, painted them white, and on them determined from which tier takes the mine and when it comes out of the hatch. To facilitate this work, wooden mine racks were to be replaced by iron ones. While the miners were feeding and preparing mines, there were fires on the ship, damaged steam and water mains, and conditional holes were sealed. There was a tense struggle for survivability. Novikov, together with Bulishkin, went around the ship. They tried to pass to the third cellar on the lower deck, but it turned out to be clogged with mines. Bulishkin went down into the first cellar, carefully examined its wooden structures. Many elements were fastened with ordinary carpenter's staples. He also visited the battle stations, everywhere inquiring about working conditions. After that, the ship-wide drill was over. The wind was getting stronger. It was already tearing the foam off the crests of the waves. The night promised to be restless. The rain had stopped, and the clouds were almost clinging to the masts. It was rocky. The farther we moved northward, the deeper into the mainland the peaks of Psychotelin went. The coasts here are harsh, high, and precipitous. They are cut by numerous streams, rivulets, and in other places rivers, in the mouths of which we saw small settlements, villages. At the mouths of small rivulets we rarely met even separate houses. Everywhere the tiger thicket approached the sea. The coasts were diverse. There was not a single similar to another cape, a piece of land. There are a lot of notable places, and all of them are unique. As soon as the weather allowed, the navigators started to sketch and describe special landmarks again. The area to the north of Belkin Cape was passed out of sight of the shores. The lighthouse Zolotoy lighted us in the night gloom. By morning we approached Nelma, a fishing village on the bank of the river with the same name. The tops of the spurs of the ridge approached us again. The precipitous banks are covered here with even more dense forest. It's noticeably fresher. You can't do without a coat. Comrade Chief of Watch. Something strange. The signalman's foreman addresses. The hills on the shore are densely forested, but right on the bow, far from the shoreline, we can see a lighthouse from under the water. It can't be floating on the water. The watch commander looked into the stereo tube, standing and thought. I advised him to clarify on the map what lighthouse should appear. Sandy Lighthouse, but it is on the shore, and this one is on the water. In 5 minutes you will see that the lighthouse is on the shore. Indeed, not even 5 minutes passed, as all present saw that in this place nature had washed a huge ellipse-shaped sandy spit with pebbles, far out to the sea, on which the lighthouse stood, and a lagoon was formed between the precipitous high shore and the lighthouse. From Pesheny we are going to Sovetskaya Gavan. We passed Grosevich Bay, and almost pyramidal top of Sovetskaya Mountain opened up, on the slope of which the red partisan lighthouse stood. It means that behind it, there is not far the entrance to the largest and deepest bay Sovetskaya Gavan, well sheltered from winds. From behind the mountain slope the coastline did not appear for a long time. At last it appeared, an almost level line, and the tops of the mountain range could faintly be seen in the depth of the mainland. The low basalt shores were cut by many small coves. It was impossible to know which one was the true entrance. There were cases when captains made a mistake and paid dearly for it. On the bridge our guests scrutinized rather monotonous landscape. The exception is Sovetskaya Mountain, covered with a forest, in which you can see the image of a double-headed eagle, once cut down. "Navigator, how soon is the turn?" asks the commander of the ship. "In 10 minutes, the lighthouse on Menshikov Peninsula will be visible. After that, we'll turn." Nizao, the emergency. Lower the anchor. In a flash, everything on the ship came to life. People scattered to their appointed places. Suddenly, the Menshikov lighthouse appeared. Behind it, the island of Tulo appeared on the left. At once we could see a wide, more than a mile-wide entrance to the bay that cut far into the land. The ship beautifully described the circulation. To the left, in the depths behind the cape, is Postovaya Bay. We need to the right, to the bay, where there is a fishing wharf and a pier built by fleet builders. The smallest, commands the commander of the ship. We can't see the pier. We can see only a chopped row, from which there is an embankment and a road. We have to moor to this row. Having masterfully performed a complicated maneuver, Novikov approached the so-called mooring. The moorings had to be fastened to the trees growing on the high precipitous shore. The shores to the north of the bay, from Sovgavan to Dacha, indented, forming many coves and Vantno Bay, second only to Sovgavan itself. In the bay, at the birth of which the Erivan became, except for a few buildings of a fishing collective farm, nothing is visible. The uninhabited land appeared before us in all its pristine condition. The sight is impressive. According to the custom established in the brigade, all navigators together with cadets and 2 Red Fleet helmsmen went on dinghies with oars for reconnaissance. We especially wanted to see the neighbouring bay Nostovaya, at the bottom of which rested the legendary frigate Pallada. We approached the bay. The high steep shore covered with dense heterogeneous forests formed a bowl here, at the bottom of which the clouds and the forest were reflected in a mirror-like surface. We lowered our oars into the water and admired what we saw for a few minutes in silence, afraid to break the silence. It was so beautiful that it was breathtaking. We went in dinghies along the bay, made a measurement, but we did not find the frigate Pallada, no matter how hard we tried. On the steep shore we saw dozens of 3 huts. The whole population, from small to great, having seen our dinghies, gathered on a slope near a makeshift pier. We went out on the pier. Everyone went about his business. Sketches, measurements, notes. Koval photographed Postovaya Bay. I went along the embankment to the shore to see the whole northern bay from the top of the slope. After about 10 meters, I saw water running from a 4-inch pipe embedded in the shore slope. "We have a strong spring here. The water is pure and clean." "You try it," suggested a curly-haired boy who came up to me. I tried it. The water is really marvelously delicious and very cold. As I climbed up, the whole panorama of the northern bay opened up in front of me. I could see the bay in depth and the entrance together with Menshikov Peninsula. We returned to the ship in the evening. After dinner, we left for Alexandrovsk on Sakhalin. See, the weather turned bad. It rained fine and thin. Soon fog came. We are sailing in the impenetrable fog, which the signal searchlight barely penetrates at 10 meters. So much for the beautiful fall season on the Sea of Japan. The ship's commander doesn't leave the bridge. Everyone speaks in a low voice so as not to miss any extraneous sound. Finally, the fog was cut off and we came out on clear water. In the first half of the day we arrived in Aleksandrovsk and stood on the roadstead, the shore, the blistered rocks of layered flagstone. In other places, black or dark grey veins can be seen in them. As we found out later, this is an open coal seam outcrop. Sakhalin produces excellent hard coal. Mechanical engineer Evstratov dreamed of replenishing the ship's supplies with Sakhalin coal. The anchorage near Alexandrovsk in western winds, which come suddenly, is not safe. Anchors because of flagstones do not hold well. Soon Burishkin and the commander of the Erivan left on a boat to the port, and Parisky and I and the ship's cadets from the bridge began to look with interest at the city, which looked more like a central Russian village. It is situated on the terrace of a high hill. The church, houses, mostly wooden ones, are well visible. The port, or rather the harbour, is made of high, massive wooden rows, which we had never seen before, forming a solid-sized bucket. Thin masts stick out from behind the high quay. There are boats there, on the shore above the high tide line. Back on the ship, Novikov gathered the command staff, chief petty officers, and announced, "The command staff and chief petty officers are authorized to go ashore in 2 shifts for a period of 2 hours. The manager of the wardroom and the ship's shop should be sent with the first shift to buy everything necessary. There's something here to buy. Ship's cadets and navigators can stay ashore both shifts." The harbour commander warned, "There are sudden squalls that can drift to the shore, or even throw out. That's why the car should be kept warm. Watch commander to be on the bridge. Carefully monitor the drift. Navigators to give the watch, bearing to notable places that guarantees safety. Any siren, signal, raised flag tees. Not communication with the shore is provided by a harbour boat. If something emergency happens, a boat of border guards will help." In the first shift, Paraisky and Karatayev went ashore together with us. We entered by dinghy into the harbour, where there were several plashkouts. It was the hour of full low tide. Our boat, having found itself exactly at the bottom of a deep well, became very small, and the wall of the pier rail, which had seen the sights, was several metres high. On it we climbed on a wooden ladder, slippery from algae. In an hour and a half, having finished sketches and measurements, leaving the helmsman on the dinghy, we went to the town. The streets were unpaved and not wide. The houses were old, squat, stoutly built. The wood was blackened. Many, as in the village, have covered yards. Almost all the inhabitants have their own vegetable gardens. There are far fewer front gardens. In the centre of the city, the houses are more solid. By the church square are the town offices, stores, and household businesses. Most of the houses have big shutters on the outside. On the outskirts, the houses are smaller, and there are no shutters on the windows. Since here work at logging, others mine coal, do various crafts, fishing, farming, grow vegetables, and even bread. The fields are behind the hills, in the river valleys. Behind the hills grow lush, abundant grasses. And at the appointed time we left the anchor and headed for De Castries. The weather was favourable. First we saw the high granite Cape de Castries, crimson from the dawn, severe and unapproachable, beautiful in the rays of the rising sun. Then an almost semicircular bay surrounded by high banks with age-old taiga appeared before us. Complete windlessness, marvellous smoothness of the water mirror, special, unique beauty. Only when we approached the anchorage place we could see the observatory island merging with the wooded shores and covering the river mouth. We anchored. Bolishkin warned that we would stay in De Castries for a week. After the flag hoisting the ship's cadets, the ship's navigator, helmsman, and Paraisky and I went ashore. Potapenko was entrusted to take measurements with the cadets, and Paraisky and I decided to get to the nearest peak to see all the sights from its height. There was a clearing towards De Castries, but there was not even a path to the summit. Still we went. The slope is steep. You can't run around. We passed through a thicket of small birch trees safely. Further on, the forest stretched on. At the edge of the forest it was quite sparse, but the higher we climbed, the more closely the crowns of larches and spruces interlocked. Occasionally there were pines. There were half-decayed thick trunks lying like warriors fallen in battle. My feet sank into the moss. The branches of the trees were so thickly intertwined that it was semi-darkness all around, and only in some places bright rays of sunlight pierced the dense crowns. After half an hour we were exhausted and sat down to rest. Now there was an impenetrable thicket coming from all sides. After 50 meters we got out and could not believe our eyes. At our feet there was a huge glade of lingonberry bushes. The berries were large. We tasted them. They were delicious. We were full to the brim. We had never seen such berry abundance in Russian forests. We walked around the clearing along the edge of the forest. Our soul did not allow us to trample such beauty, to crush the wonderful gift of nature. We slowly climbed to the top. We got there and stopped again as if mesmerized. The whole bay is as if in the palm of our hand. The taiga, as if having escaped from the distant mountains, having reached the sea, stopped, admiring it. High capes rose as fortresses guarding the wide bay. Our Erevan looked like a small vessel among them. Having taken full caps of cowberries, we quickly descended from the mountain and soon reached the pier. Full tide. The dinghy was almost flush with the decking of the wharf. Easily jumped into it, immediately began rowing to the ship. In the wardroom there was only talk about everything we had seen. especially about fresh cowberries. The commander had no other choice but to allow everyone to go ashore in small groups in shifts. Last days Bulishkin and those who arrived with him stayed on the shore for a long time. They worked on the ship till the deep night. They were in a hurry to finish in time. My charges, ship cadets put their records in order, systematized the collected materials. In Vladivostok they would have to report, hold a kind of exam for summer practice. Its grades were included in the graduation grade. It looked like it was time for us to go back. Coal reserves were melting, and there was nowhere to replenish them. If we were unlucky with the weather, we would have to suffer for lack of fuel. On the 7th day we started on the way back, expecting to pass the places of the coast not examined earlier in the daylight. Soon the wind became stronger and the water became choppy. The storm began. From Peshanoi to Belkin we were trembling and shaking hard. The drift was unprecedented. The course had to be changed by 17 degrees. The ship was almost lagging against the wave. The roll reached 25 degrees. The waves were flooding everything that could be flooded. It was extremely difficult for the helmsman to keep the ship on course. The propeller was often bare on the wave. Shokaratayev, the bosun and the men in formation, somehow miraculously keeping on their feet, systematically checked the upper deck fastenings of everything that could move. Often the ship struck the waves in such a way that its whole hull groaned and the masts shook with a fine tremor. It had been a long time since there had been a dry thread on all those on the commander's bridge and on the upper deck. Steam heating was on in the deck houses. There at least you can warm up and dry off a little. The bosun organized a school of needlework on the spar deck for all those who were seasick, as the Red Fleet men jokingly called the weaving of mats, paths, and cranes from. The poor Toptijin was the most seasick of all. He squeezed himself between the engine hatch and the fan socket, lay in complete exhaustion, did not take any food, and did not want to change his place. Soon storm subsided. The sea, having removed the angry wrinkles, shone with calm smoothness. It became noticeably warmer. Our passengers stretched into the cabin. Yes, the sea really hardens people. Struggle with the elements, victory over it, and the whole way of fleet life forge a real man's character. On the way back to Vladivostok, Belishkin went around the ship, visited all compartments. He told a lot and interestingly about the struggle for Soviet power, about Vladimir Lenin, asked people about the service, about everyday life, promised that in time on the barriers will be installed mines and hoists for lifting mines. One of the Red Fleet asked Belishkin about vacations. Shablably, it is necessary to do the job first, to gain strength here at sea. And soon, so that no one would be willing to conflict with us, and after that we can think about vacations. The member of the military council answered him. That ends the last night combat drill before arrival to Vladivostok, the last ship-wide exercise in night conditions. Now they take mines to the upper deck and roll them there, as in a real battle alarm. Nowhere, neither below nor above, can't pass, everything is occupied by mines. The picture is impressive. Bulishkin, together with the commander, bypass all the battle stations. Mines are finally prepared. Reports on the bridge commander B.C. Pone. Begin conditional mine laying. Orders the commander. Here the commands, I write. 100 put UESLE port to the bridge. 200 put. Staging is finished. Both in disarm the mines and lower them into the cellars. The exercise lasted several hours. Belishkin was satisfied with the actions of the crew. It is a difficult service on the barriers, said the member of the military council. Until I saw it myself, I did not realize its complexity. Your minesmen are masters in their work. I reported the assessment of navigational knowledge of cadets to the flag navigator of the fleet EY Lapushkin. I asked to appoint U. Koval to the Erevan, to the navigator's position. But nothing came out of it. It was decided to appoint the best graduates to the striking force of the fleet, submarines. A few days later, the first graduation of cadets who graduated from the famous Franz Naval School and underwent training on the ships of the Pacific Fleet took place. M. Viktorov announced the order on awarding ranks, warmly congratulated the graduates. The gala dinner prepared by the cocks of the training unit, where the graduation ceremony took place, was modest. As an exception on the occasion of the first graduation, the Chief of Naval Forces allowed wine. Viktorov and Bulishkin proclaimed very heartfelt toasts, congratulated the young commanders on joining the friendly, strong and hard-working Navy family. Having arrived at the connection, These young commanders immediately got involved in the bustling life of their ships. It was necessary to hurry. There was a lot of urgent business everywhere. Everything was given to them: energy, intelligence, abilities, and passion. That is why our Pacific Fleet grew so quickly and became a formidable force on the Far East Sea frontiers. The fleet received new submarines, new types of airplanes, and other military equipment. Coastal artillery batteries were built, units and formations were formed. In December 1933, the first party conference of the Far East Naval Forces was held. It noted the successes achieved in the construction of the fleet and focused all its work on the issues of the rapid development of incoming ships and equipment, the development of the sea theatre. We with Arseny Golovko passed the preliminary tests before entering the Naval Academy, but the Credentials Committee refused us because there was no replacement. The summer campaign ended successfully. We were not scolded. Tomsk was repaired, other minships remained in service. Somehow, I was sitting in my cabin putting my navigator's office in order. Suddenly a messenger appeared. "The Chief of Staff is calling you." And I was at Basistoys just 2 hours ago. It means it's urgent. Who can be entrusted with the duties of the flagship navigator? Nikolai Euphremovich asked. I couldn't find a better person than Gorshkov. And where should I go? Basisty involuntarily smiled. You will have to temporarily command the Erevanya. Novikov is leaving for his family. There is a smart senior assistant on Erevan, my classmate Karataev. I tried to object. Everything is right, but this is the decision of the Chief of Naval Forces. Go take care of business. Novikov leaves tomorrow. In the evening come together and report. I met Novikov on the deck of the Erevani. We went into his cabin and he gave me his last words of advice. Then we invited Karataev, talked together and went to report to our superiors. By dinner time everything was finished. I went home and Tikhon Andreevich left for Leningrad. So the morning flag raising, when the XO reported. Comrade Vice Commander of the ship. The crew is assembled, and we went around the formation together. My introduction to the ship's crew took place. The ship's life flowed in its own order. Boris Vasilievich Karataev knew his business perfectly well, and it was very easy for me with him. No matter what you say, but to command a ship, to manage it is a tempting, interesting, responsible and, needless to say, flattering to everyone's ego. Of the ships I liked most of all were destroyers. They are especially good during the attack. To successfully attack from a distance of no more than 40 cable meters from the command staff of these ships requires boldness, skill, courage, lightning-fast reaction, and excellent mastery of the tactics of weapons. In the Pacific Fleet, which was created at that time, destroyers have not yet been. The largest and fastest among the available ships in the fleet were minesweepers. The surface fleet began with them, and many of those who later successfully commanded not only ships, but also formations and even fleets served on them. Karataev came into my cabin. I received an order to get ready to receive mines from the arriving railroad train and transport them to the mine depot. I gave instructions to the miner. The mechanic is warming up the car so that we had time to moor at the mine depot by daylight. It is not a difficult thing to move away from the berth when you are standing stern to it. There's no wind, the day is bright. Give up the mooring and go wherever you want. Mooring a ship from the start, with its side to the berth of a mine storehouse, is a more complicated matter. Even on the bridge, when we were leaving the Arsenal Pier, I felt physically how the crew was watching my every action closely, comparing me with Novikov, and I didn't want to fail. I knew that if I fiddled with mooring, I would not earn authority and respect in people's eyes. Each crew member is very jealous of the honor of his ship and cherishes it. In their assessments of the commander, the crew is unappealing and does not forgive mistakes, ineptitude of the commander. They will not say a word but will not forgive. Often in this situation, the commander is looking for another position. Who wants to find himself in a similar position? No one, me neither, especially when you're first starting out, and I'm taking my first exam in front of the crew today. The warehouse pier is showing. The wind is weak, but pressing. Boris Karatavi is looking at me, asking me with his eyes how we'll approach. We are moored to starboard, balloon to small. Helmsmen keep to a separate tree to the left of the pier. Of the ends and cranes ready on the starboard side. Launch the dinghies. Command approached and moored normally. I look at the faces of the mooring crew. No frowns, so they don't disapprove. But I myself knew that I had given a few extra commands to the machine. Everything could have been done more calculatingly. The minesmen who brought the moorings ashore on the dinghies worked above all praise. The team, trained by Karatev, acted coherently. Having handed over their mines at dawn, we went to Vladivostok, to the Arsenal Pier, to take mines from the railcars. Here it is necessary to moor by board. But how to approach when there was a gap between the minesweepers standing at the berth, which was barely more than the length of Erevan? Besides, although there is a small wind, it is a squeezing wind. This is a task, compared to which the mooring at the mine storehouse is nothing. Not without the help of Boris Karataev and joint efforts of the teams sent from the minesweepers to the shore to receive the moorings, we safely moored. The commander of the minesweeper Hercules, Pyotr Mikhailov, immediately came to my cabin. "I'm glad you didn't crush my Hercules. What the hell did you think you were doing mooring on the side? It's just a miracle that you managed to get through such a gap without causing trouble." The bosses ordered us to take mines from the wagons. If we'd known about it, we'd have docked the minesweepers. We'd have had 30 meters more clear water. Congratulations on the baptism. Later we had to moor and maneuver in no less difficult conditions, in darkness and bad weather. Skill, and confidence grew. And for the first time acquired commander's experience no commander ever forget. In the first days of November we returned to Vladivostok. On the eve of November 7, the navigator reported, "Mati, comrade commander, the barograph shows a sharp drop in pressure. It must be a storm wind. Fix every 2 hours the pressure and wind strength." I ordered the navigator. Soon the wind reached almost 10 points. I went around the ship. I examined the moorings. Steel, old and rusty, taken together with the ship. The cables are stretched like strings, but they hold well. During the night, the thickest snow fell. Once again, we had to check the moorings they held. We should have additional ends, but we don't have them. Our military port could give us a new steel rope only on the Gordon for lifting mines from the cellar. There were no other cables. In the morning, about 7 o'clock, I suddenly felt the ship shudder, as if someone had piled on top of it. Through the porthole I could see how quickly the side of the nearby barrier Voroshilovsk flashed by. I jumped out on the upper deck. The wind was extremely strong. Snow was blowing. I couldn't see a thing. Our ship was carried out to the middle of the bay and put lagging to the wind. I ran aft. Karataev is already there. Half of the starboard bollard was twisted. A steel cable dangled on it. The second cable was also broken, hanging astern. "Boris Vasilievich, what cholera is keeping us lagging to the wind?" I looked from above and we can't see anything. "Now we'll clean the aft ports and we'll see." There was a whistle of the intercom pipe from the cellar. "There's a mooring barrel under the stern," Kovalenko reported. "We've caught the propeller on it." "Wow! How can we get free of it?" "Try, Commander. What if we try to pull the bow mooring end through canvas blocks to the stern?" Ian suggested Kovalenko. "You've another fix it on the barrel and pull it away from the propeller by the scow, then back up," Karataev and I almost said in unison. That's how we got rid of the barrel. When the wind died down, we went to the pier. By the end of the mooring, the clouds had broken. Everything around was white. The streets and the walls of the piers were carpeted with fluffy carpet. We were not allowed to stagnate. Often we went to sea to ensure combat training of various compounds. At the Navy exercises, mine sails, as a rule, represented all classes of ships of the enemy. We were attacked by airplanes and fast torpedo boats and finished by coastal artillery. In early December 1933, returning with the commander of the submarine brigade Kirill Osipov after providing submariners, shivering and freezing on the fierce northwest, we moored in Mali Ulysses to take fresh water. Not 2 hours later, a messenger brought a semaphore to the wardroom during dinner. To the commander of the Erevan, "Get 2 coils of steel cable for moorings at the harbour," commander of the main military port. "Simply marvellous," Boris Vasilievich exclaimed. "I don't believe my ears. Usually you go to the port and then the port commander himself invites you to get a steel cable." It turns out the proverb, "There is good without good," says Potapenko. If we had not been torn away from the shore on the holiday, we would not have seen new moorings like our own ears. I liked the cabin of the Erevani. Here they talked seriously about serious things, laughed heartily at funny things, and knew how to tease each other. Well done, Karataev, the senior in the wardroom, and Tikhon Andreevich did not disdain a joke, a quip, or a fable. It is well known. It's easier to do business and work with fun. One day, when half of December had already passed, the cabin door opened without knocking. "My comrade commander, our commander has arrived," the messenger reported in a joyful voice. "Our commander, it's obvious that Novikov is loved on the ship. I wish I could serve in such a position." The door opened again. Now Tikhon Andreevich himself entered. Behind him came a smiling Karate. How do you live?" Novikov asked cheerfully. "The masts, cannons, and other things are in place. The propeller and rudder are intact. No casualties. You'll see the rest for yourself. The XO will report in detail." Half an hour later, we went to report to our superiors. The commander wasn't there, so we went to Basistoy with the report. "Have a seat. How was your trip, Tikhon Andreevich?" "It's good, but parting with Leningrad was sad, of course. The girls roared and brought my mother to tears. But on the train we had a lot of impressions. We got away. When they saw Vladivostok and the bay, they only went to squeak in one voice. How beautiful it is." "Do you have any complaints to the flag navigator?" Basisti asked. "I do." "What claims?" "Was surprised by the chief of staff. Not enough perseverance. I got 2 coils of rope, but I should have gotten 4, Novikov finished jokingly. That was the end of my peculiar internship in the commander's position. I gained a lot of useful things for myself and, it seems, made new and loyal friends. Not a week later, I got another call from Basisto. "I have a serious business with you," said Nikolai Efremovich. "I'm sure you will like it. Our connection is being replenished with 2 minesweepers, Astrakhan and Theodore Net, or rather, 2 steamships, the same as Tom. One of them you are to command." Not without excitement I read the order. "Appoint Vladimir Alexandrovich Andreev as commander of the minesweeper Theodore Net. Nikolai Efremovich, thank you for the science, for all the good things too." I began to thank the chief of staff with excitement. "Don't give me that," Basisti interrupted me. "There's nothing to thank me for. The chief of naval forces put you in the order. I guess he has not forgotten his stubborn flag. Today hand over the flagstaff affairs to Gorshkov, and tomorrow in the commercial port accept your Theodore Net, together with the commission." The core of the crew was picked up from other minesweepers. Chief Petty Officer of Machinists Glitsky is worth 10, and others in the engine crew flagship mechanic Sokolov personally selected. We took the Chief Petty Officer of Miners Kovalenko from Novikov from the Erevan. Parisky did his best for you too. What else can I say? I'm glad that all flagship specialists reached out a helping hand to their comrade on the staff. Don't forget and appreciate this help. Yes, one more thing. You have a temper like gunpowder, so be more careful. Remember, not all fortresses can be taken at once. Learn to control yourself. Well, break a leg. Better yet, 7 feet under the keel. A firm handshake. And I'm on the upper deck, where the even already autumn cool wind refreshes my face. I handed over my business to Sergei Georgievich Gorshkov. In my pocket I have a list of 35 people selected by the flagship specialists for the crew of the Theodore Net. There is no steamship yet, and I'm kind of out of business. One day, the chairman of the admissions committee said that the next morning Theodore Net will approach the fleet coal depot, where by 8:00 all members of the committee and appointed personnel should arrive. The sight of our ship, rather shabby, did not arouse admiration in anyone. Not only that, there was no second anchor on the ship, and the steel mooring ropes were rusty for centuries. However, we went up the gangway to our Theodore Net without a shadow of despondency, with only one thought: let's make the ship as it should be in the Navy. We took so much coal that it was enough for the whole winter until the end of the repair. At the wall of the shipyard we were put next to a Astrakhan. During the winter, we had to have time to equip steel racks in the holds for mines, to install lifting stands. This is already an achievement. In addition, the ship was armed with more powerful 120mm guns, located in the bow and stern, installed counter-mounted machine guns to shoot at aircraft, and in the bottom of the ship will finally be equipped with a shaft for electromechanical lag. There is also a place for gyrocompass installation. In a word, we will be anything. 2 ships, built by Nevsky Shipyard back in 1912, specially for sailing in far eastern northern Sprats, are standing near the wall of the factory. They even had sailing equipment in case of trouble. Who is better competition on the ships? Who is better to convert their steamer into a minesweeper, or, as submariners mocked, into a mine carrier? Friendship is friendship, but still we look at each other jealously. As the living quarters were being equipped to accommodate the personnel, we were receiving new recruits. By the end of December, the crew was fully manned, and it turned out to be almost 75% COMSO. We started to the plant in December, and we were given 4 months for all the work. We created brigades for cleaning of holds, premises. We organized a competition between the brigades. Where it was the most difficult, we put communists as foremen. Day and night the work is boiling. The machinery team has a lot to do. Not only the main machine, all sorts of bottoms and bilge pumps, but also 8 steam winches, the windlass, the steering machine need to be repaired and adjusted by their own forces. At the same time, the winches must be repaired so that at each hold one of the 2 winches is always in readiness for equipping the holds with steel racks, metal elevators. In a word, the machine crew works round the clock, forgetting about days off. Junior commanders Uglitsky, Bashkirtsev, Bilge Serdyuk. All communists and Komsomol members set an example. In a short time we managed to turn the first disparate team into an unusually close-knit and friendly one. From the shore guys brought old copper and brass pipe scraps, some almost a century-old valves, nuts and even scraps of copper sheets. Seeing all this, I was naturally surprised. Why do we need such junk on the ship? So we are for the good of the cause. We'll make castings out of them, the young bilge man replies. What castings? My classmate from the preparatory school, graduated from the Naval Engineering School, senior ship's mechanic Kozlovsky, appeared on the deck and fervently stood up for his subordinates. In our military port, in the technical warehouses of the necessary materials are not thick, and what is available are given to submarines. Well, so we decided, in the off hours, to collect on the territory of the plant non-ferrous scrap metal. In the foundry shop I was promised to cast from this scrap the necessary diameter of billets. Castings. From them we will make anything on our shipyard. For the sake of order, I strictly warned them not to bring something good from the factory instead of junk, and I was happy at heart. The cannoneers' commendors tacitly joined the factory brigade equipping the artillery cellars as well as riveted mounts for the guns. When the cannons were installed, the commandors began to take care of them as if they were red maidens. It was hard to keep up with Commodore Granovsky, a Moscow Komsomol member and the owner of the second gun, Siberian Karyagin. I especially remember Karygin, a stout man with light curls and eyes of extraordinary blue. He had a surprisingly generous soul. He was always ready to help his comrades, but if anyone cheats, is cowardly, will only say, "You are a rotten man, not a person." In work, Karyagin was passionate, liked to compete with his friends. Such in trouble will not bend and will always help a comrade. By May holidays of 1934, Astrakhan and Theodore Nett finished all works connected with re-equipment, passed sea trials, measured speeds on the measuring mile, determined deviation, gathered full coal stock, and on the same day and hour on May 1 raised the Navy flags and colouring flags. The habit of getting up at 5:30 did not change me, and other commanders, my subordinates, also began to get up very early. There is no wake-up call yet, and the command staff is already on their feet. During physical exercises, the commander of the ship, commanders of units, always with their subordinates, organized physical exercise set the right rhythm for the whole ship's life. Though the party organization on the ship was small at first, but it was the communists who were the first in all good deeds and undertakings. Komsomol members followed them in everything. They were headed by the indefatigable, energetic Turusin, and when Sergei Balyaskin, with whom we travelled together from Kronstadt to the Far East in 1932, came to the ship as a deputy on political part, the educational work became even more effective. SS Balyaskin, a remarkable personality, his appearance and character a.e. pure Russian, face open, grey-blue eyes with a mist deep, penetrating the growth of Bogatyrsky, his appearance and open, benevolent character surprisingly disposed to him. Balyaskin loved to talk about nature, about everything he saw in his childhood, about meetings with Prishvin. In a word, he was a man of companionship, well-read, able to attract people to himself, to ignite them with his passion. Sergei and I soon established friendly relations, and we often visited each other's cabins to share our thoughts, or even just to talk. Sometimes Belyaskin did not hesitate to tell me about my blunders and even mistakes. Who does not make them, especially at the beginning of the command, but who likes to hear about them? Seeing my reaction, Belyaskin would say what he needed to say and go to his cabin. And then in an hour or two he'd come in again and say, "Well, Commander, have you cooled down? Let's go to the wardroom and talk. The messengers have already brewed tea according to your recipe." When you're boiling and boiling over, you can't help thinking, of course it's a shame. You've overlooked something, you've scolded someone for nothing, almost to the fullest. But it was possible to just make a remark to a person. To explain, it turns out that the deputy commander was right, and it was good that he said it right in the eye. Another time I went to him and expressed my opinion no less frankly, and so it went on. If anything difficult or good came up, we always told each other about everything without a word of explanation. Sometimes both of us would argue, but we would always understand each other and try to help. This is how true camaraderie was born. We moved to Novik Bay, the most beautiful on Ruski Island, to practice organizational tasks. At the battle stations there are trainings with training mines, and gun crews are practicing on the loading machine and on the Krylov device. The day is marvelous. The fog has not yet covered the green forests on the surrounding hills and on the top of Ruskaya Mountain. From the ship we can even see a variety of herbs, amazingly large bright flowers covering all the glades, and by some miracle climbed on the island-topped rocks. Ducks, sea hens, swim in shallow water in hidden places. The silence is such that human voices can be heard from the shore, which is about 600 meters away. On the ship, the noise of winches lifting mines from the cellars in the cages. The mines are arranged in 10 tiers, and the machinist on the steam winch must not make a mistake to get to the right tier. It is not easy to do it, as there is no signalling. In front of the driver there is only a winch drum on which the rope is being wound and unwound. It is most convenient to watch the training at the battle stations from the upper bridge. You can see the whole deck of the ship. Everything is going normally. Fleet people are working hard, and suddenly a breakdown. A young machinist was lifting the cage at full speed and did not reduce speed when the cage was approaching the stops. As a result, the stopper bent the hoist. It's a shame, before we could even start sailing, and the cellar was already out of order. Watchman, call Uglitsky and Bashkirtsev up to the second mine cellar. Muksh commands the chief mate. In those times on mine barriers, the telephone connection of the commander's bridge was only with artillery guns, and also with the stern, where the place of the commander of the mine unit was located on the alert. Uglitsky and Bashkirtsev, who had come from the engine room, again showed themselves to the best advantage. They quickly realized what was the matter and suggested to strengthen the fastening of the stopper cage with bolts, and the best miner chief Petty Officer Kovalenko found a new pin in the mine storehouse. By evening the breakage was corrected. They organized a Komsomol fly talk, where a serious conversation with the culprits took place. They decided to urgently paint the marks on the ropes of hoists in white and put on the cargo mast's darkened blue lamps so winch operator could better see the working cable. Also came to the conclusion that we need more training at night. All these good suggestions came from Komsomol members and were soon implemented. For training gunners, the brigade's flagship artilleryman Artem Brzezinski gave us a Krylov device, but the rangefinders were clearly unlucky. The rangefinder was new, but we had to train on stationary coastal targets. Not a day went by that the ship's artilleryman Moskalev did not ask for an opportunity to train on a moving sea target. 6. What kind of outings to the sea can we talk about until the ship passes all organizational tasks? Without this, we would not be allowed to raise the pennant, and thus to be enlisted in the floating staff. Our ships are sailing, but we are only within Novik Bay. There is only one way out, to press and quickly hand over organizational tasks. Let's gather the crew and lay everything out frankly. If you want to sail and catch up with those who 2 years earlier joined the service, then it's blood from the nose, and the tasks should be handed over in 2 weeks. And so we did. The meeting was interesting, and the deputy commander and I benefited a lot. At the meetings held by Belyaskin, usually there were no minutes, and perhaps the most important thing that characterized them, the utmost sincerity. This time, too, everyone was unanimous in their opinion. Tom scanned a ribbon to catch up. Finally, the long-awaited hour came. Organizational tasks were taken from us by the brigade headquarters headed by Basisti. We passed everything without a stretch. On Nikolai Efremovich's face I saw that he was satisfied. Soon came the order. We raised the pennant. It meant that Theodore Net entered the line of warships. At the same time, the Astrakhan also entered service. Still, it turned out that it was not easy to overtake Marin, who now commanded the Astrakhan, and even in controlling the maneuvers of the ship, especially when mooring, he was no better. So the Teodorovs continued to have an unspoken competition with the Astrakhans. In the mine part, which was commanded by a very clever mine specialist and Commander Pekarev, our dolas were somewhat better than those of the Astrakhans, except for one thing, the selection and lifting of mines from the water. No matter how hard we tried, but often Astrakhan, even for 2 or 3 minutes, picked its mines before we did. By the decision of Combreg Vasiliev, we initially practiced mine laying together. We knew that this task would be accepted by the brigade commander. We prepared for it intensively. 40 training mines, control hemp ends with metal buoys similar to a loaf of bread, for which they were called bread, milestones necessary to mark the place of actual mine laying, as well as everything necessary for the selection of mines from the water, all carefully checked and ready for use east. Standing in the bay at the roadstead, early morning, as they say the sun has not woken up yet, I went out of the cabin to the upper deck, and I see, on the flagship the Pasha call signs and some other signal flags are raised. Signalman, what are the signals on the Tomsk? Our and Astrakhan's call signs, and the signal commander urgently come to the flagship. Only we had time to depart from the gangway as we looks. The dinghy from Astrakhan also departed. There was no need to push the rowers. They themselves are pushing as fast as they can. We row a little ahead to the gangway of Tomsk, but there is an unwritten rule of politeness in the fleet. The younger gives way to the older, and Marine is years older than me, and he became the commander of the Minzag 2 years earlier. On the Tomsk Brigade commander handed the commanders of the ships on a secret package with a wide red stripe crossing it diagonally, and prepare the ships to leave urgently. You'll learn the rest when you read the document of today's exercise. Combrig will go on the Astrakhan, and on the Theodore on the exercise will be representatives of the brigade headquarters. Is that clear? That's how it is. It turns out that before we could take the bags in our hands, the exercise has already begun, and the time will be counted with the precision of a chronometer. My comrade Andreev, with you on your boat will go flagship artilleryman Brzezinski and mechanic of the Tomsk. Pin. While I was listening to the Chief of Staff's instructions, Marina's boat had already departed. Now try to catch up the lost time. Finally, all the representatives gathered and our boat also departed. Nothing twisted dies. Started a creditable exercise. Every second counts, make the oars bend. I've seen a lot of rowing races, participated in them myself, took prizes, but I've never seen a dinghy with such speed. No sooner had the dinghy reached the Theodore's gangway than I couldn't stand it, and shout, "Merci NTA, emergency shooting from the anchor." In 10 minutes the crew to assemble in the wardroom. Loud bells rang, located in all the rooms. They were echoed by the XO's commands, transmitted into a megaphone from the upper running bridge. In an instant, the whole ship came to life. The men, as is customary in the Navy, rushed to their seats. The tarpaulin covers are being removed from the guns, from the cargo winches. Everyone knows if we go to sea, we go only in full combat readiness on the alert. Usually it takes several hours to warm up, to bring any main steam engine to the required temperature. But this is an emergency. The rules of operation provide for this, but only masters of their craft can operate the machine. Any misstep and the machine is out of order, and it cannot be repaired without the plant's intervention. I know how difficult it is now in the engine room. Even though the whole machine team is 1-to-1, I am still worried, and it's the first time Pinchuk, who is inspecting me, is the flagship mechanic. The flagship artilleryman, Brzezinski, has a requirement. The gun and the gun crew are one and the same. It means that people must work impeccably accurately and as fast as possible. And in the artillery cellars, the order and cleanliness should be like in an infirmary. Artillery was Artem Brzezinski's whole life. He had a sharp mind and lightning-fast reactions. I guess that Artem dreamed not of our multi-caliber artillery with the most primitive control devices. As soon as the fleet was formed, a division of new patrol ships, which was commanded by Tikhon Andreyevich Novikov, Artemy Georgievich Brzezinski became a divisional artilleryman, and when the northern sea route from the Baltic came destroyers and Voikov, when the 7th Naval Brigade was formed, He became the brigade's flagship artilleryman. The Cambridge commander, the command staff is assembled. Together with Vladivostok, who also had time to familiarize himself with the contents of the package, we go down to the wardroom. Navigator, a map of the Ussuriysky Bay. I'm putting on the map the received tracing of the mine barrier. Your attention, please. We have very little time. The essence of the exercise, together with the Astrakhan, will make a conditional mine laying in the Ussuri Bay. What inputs will be given by the inspectors, we will see. After the conditional mine laying, we go to Slaviansky Bay, where we make together with Astrakhan mine laying 30 training mines. I ask the navigator to pay special attention to counting, and the mineral to organize the mine laying simultaneously from 2 posts. Sergei Balyaskin added that we will not hold a meeting of all personnel. There is no time, and the situation does not allow. All party political work should be concentrated in combat units at battle stations, where and should be brought to the people of the goals and objectives of the campaign. No sooner had Balyaskin finished than the chief petty officer of machinists Oglitsky literally flew into the wardroom. "No time, comrade commander. The car is ready for the trip." We immediately raise our call signs. All commanders went to their places. I took binoculars from my cabin and quickly went up to the upper bridge. "Nurse Astrakhan, hasn't she raised her call signs yet?" "No, she hasn't," the first-year signalman reported, a little embarrassed. "And soon, comrade commander, Astrakhan has raised its call signs?" "So we won 5 minutes. We'll need them." So, battle drill. Pick up the anchor chain, leave 1 depth on the fairlead." "I see." 2 lifeboats departed from the Tomsk, one carrying the brig's commander and the other the brigade's chief of staff. Not 4 minutes later, the XO reported. "The ship is ready for campaign and battle." "The commander, it seems to be working well." Balyaskin turns to me. "Nothing so far, that's true. But let's wait out without reason that they say that chickens are counted in the fall." XO. "I'll meet the chief of staff at the gangway myself. As soon as he steps on deck, that gangway must be raised and piled up at once." The expected dinghy with Basistoy has arrived. "No, comrade chief of staff. The ship is ready for battle and march." While we were going up to the navigator's deckhouse, Combrig had time to arrive at Astrakhan, and there they hoisted on the mast a red flag with a white 5-pointed star, the flag of the junior flagship. Astrakhan took off the anchor, reports foreman signalling Glukov. Another vigilance check was given to the signal watch by the commander. XO. Follow the flagship and do not miss further than a cable. Fog may descend from the hills. I myself, by old navigator's habit, have long ago determined our anchorage place and put it in my navigator's notebook. Now I wrote down the time of shooting and the lag countdown. As soon as we left the bay and lay in the keel of the Astrakhan on the course to the Ussuriysky Bay, Basisti announced. "No, fog to the navigator. Conditional mine laying strictly according to the number. Only at the end of it you have the right to determine your place." Basisti, having given us an introduction, said he would go by ship. Balyaskin went to accompany him. You can learn a lot by walking around the ship with a good chief. Conditional mine laying on the ships was successful. Errors in the calculation did not go beyond the established norms. The mines were lowered into the cellars. While we went to Slaviansky Bay, the crew had lunch and a little break. The actual mine laying was also done before the enumeration. The control ends during the mine dropping did not get mixed up. The milestones, which marked the beginning and end of mine laying, became normal. Each ship anchored at its own line of mines. Flagship navigator of the brigade Sergei Gorshkov together with the ship navigators determined the degree of accuracy of mine laying by each ship. Flagship miner Boris Vasilievich Karatev with the ship's miners on the control ends determined the accuracy of setting each mine. There were no criminals. Both navigators and miners coped with their work. Now the final score depended on how quickly the ship would pick its mines out of the water, and the main thing is not to lose any of them. If we lose one, it's a lousy business. We'll have to watch and trawl until we find it. And, of course, instead of a plus for combat training, we'll earn a big minus. The weather was quiet. The water in the bay was like a mirror. Therefore, although the day had already gone uphill, the selection of mines still began. It was required to bring to each mine in turn on a dinghy hemp rope, fix it to the control end of the mine and winch it to the side of the ship. then hoist it aboard with a cargo boom. It seems simple, but it takes a lot of skill, and I want to do everything faster to overtake the Astrakhan. From the bridge I notice that Marin's ship goes from mine to mine, but does not anchor. Wow! Well done, Marin. What an idea. He'll overtake us. I'm trying to do like Marin. And people are working so much more cheerful. Rowing, bringing the cable to the mine. It is necessary now at a much shorter distance. Already 24 mines on board. We started for the third, as suddenly from the dinghy sounds. Stop machine. The conductor is winded on the propeller. He failed to blame the rowers. It's his own fault. He failed to maneuver the ship. All attempts to clean the propeller from the dinghy were unsuccessful. I wish we had divers, but they are not provided for in our staff. However, Astrakhan has a diver. I was thinking sorrowfully, and I saw someone jump into the water from the stern. What a mess on the stern. I shout into the intercom. Its machinist Bashkirtsev, instead of a diver, dived to clean the propeller. He took the bosun's knife with him. Instead of diving from the board, open a latch port in the aft mine cellar, lower a storm trap or a gazebo to make it easier to work. What can be said? But Bashkirtsev is a smart junior commander. So the work on cleaning the propeller, though slowly, but was progressing. Meanwhile, Astrakhan was almost finishing the selection of its mines. I went down into the mine cellar and watched the work. Through the open hatch, I heard the voice of a messenger. Matsu Command Commander Semaphore. Read. Note into the commander. I can send a diver. Marine. Writing to the commander of the Astrakhan. Thank you for your comradely help. We'll finish it on our own.
At last the propeller is cleaned, but 40 minutes were irretrievably lost, and all because of my fault. I myself taught people how to work better and...
You can admire how the crew works, trying to catch up with what the commander missed. Yes, with such guys you can go into fire or water, and this is the most important thing in our military business. Astrakhan, meanwhile, started trawling. Apparently lost a mine. Signalman, semaphore on the Astrakhan. To the commander, I can send 2 boats with trowel. And immediately he received a reply. When you choose the mines, send them to me, with gratitude. Rivals are rivals, but we lived amicably. By the end of the campaign, our performance was not lower, but even slightly higher than that of other ships.